One of the first Canadian doctors to publicly speak out against the politically correct narrative on Canada's COVID jab rollout has just had a win against the licensing body that's been persecuting him ever since. While his battle to keep his license and the ability to advocate for informed consent isn't over, the playing field for which his upcoming disciplinary hearing will take place on has just become more level, thanks to successfully convincing the presiding panel that the COVID safety facts that the College of Physicians and Surgeons of BC wanted to have taken at face value will now have to be proved. I'm Drea Humphrey with Rebel News, and today Dr. Charles Hoffe and Lee Turner, the lawyer who's representing him, join me to talk about it. In the small village of Lytton, BC, Dr. Charles Hoffe was only known as the vital and respected part of the community. He served patients well in the rural region's emergency rooms and as a family doctor with a breadth of experience, with well over 30 years of working as a physician. But in 2021, when medical tyranny was the established new normal and those injured by COVID jabs were expected to shut their mouths or be ostracized for spreading vaccine hesitancy, Hoffe went from being the kind of frontline worker the people were conditioned to bang on their pots and pans for, to being vilified for being a whistleblower doctor who was simply trying to help his injured patients and warn the public about potential harms of the experimental jabs that later proved to not even prevent individuals from catching and spreading the common COVID coronavirus. I'm happy to report to you that he and his counsel, Lee Turner from Doak Sheriff's Lawyers, recently secured a win against the College of Physicians and Surgeons of BC. But before I have Turner explain that win to you, here is some of what Hoffe has been going through since his professional persecution began in March 2021.
And it all started back in March of 2021. It started literally almost less than 2 months into the vax rollout in my community. And it started when I heard that 12 countries in Europe had shut down the AstraZeneca shot because of life-threatening blood clots, and Canada was continuing to administer them as fast as possible. And Trudeau was saying that even though it wasn't safe in Europe, it was fine for Canadians. And I just thought this is absurd to ignore the safety signal. And so I sent an email to a group of my colleagues who were actually doing the COVID shots in my community to let them know about the safety signal. And that was when the Interior Health Authority reprimanded me. They gave me a gag order that I was not allowed to say anything negative about these COVID shots in the course of my work as an emergency room doctor, and that if I had any questions, it should not be directed to my colleagues, but to the medical health officer in charge of the vaccine rollout for our area.
Now, unlike the mainstream media who ignored the valid safety concerns Dr. Hoffe was raising, much like public health ignored the vaccine injury reports he was filing, Rebel News informed the public of Hoffe's concerning findings and the troubles he was facing for sharing them from the start. But what state choice media was quick to do, however, was promote the narrative that Dr. Hoffe was some sort of conspiracy kook hooked on spreading vaccine misinformation and hesitancy, and his licensing body gave them all the ammo they needed to do so. The college alleges that Dr. Hoffe published statements on social media and other digital platforms that were misleading, incorrect, or inflammatory about vaccinations, treatments, and public measures relating to COVID.
Well, essentially, they consider any statements talking about vaccine injuries to be false, because they claimed that the vaccine injuries were incredibly rare. And, my firsthand evidence in my own patients was that they were extremely common. They were not rare at all, and they were severe. And in many cases permanently damaged people. And so this is obviously a huge difference of opinion, where I was just going by what I was seeing firsthand in my own patients, but it didn't fit the political narrative, and so they considered it to be misinformation. Yeah, it's very strange. I had never. I'm sort of near the end of my career. I'm 65 years old. And I'd never had problems with the college before. I've always been a very careful and conscientious and hardworking doctor. And so to suddenly be accused of this professional misconduct for simply alerting people to safety signals is very peculiar. The college has definitely changed. They are not what they used to be. Yeah, well, one of the accusations from the college is that I have published misinformation on social media, and I think I'm probably one of the few people in Canada that has never, ever in my life ever put anything on social media. I've never had a Facebook account, or I'm not on LinkedIn. I'm not on anything, and so I just find that is, it's just absurd. Obviously, they're looking for things to accuse me of, but that's a particularly glaring false accusation, because try and find other people that have no social media history at all, and you'll be hard pressed.
Proving how Dr. Hoffe spread misinformation on his social media accounts when he doesn't have any is not the only challenge the college will now have to overcome during the upcoming hearing. Hoffe and his counsel, Lee Turner, just won the judicial notice decision for the hearing. For those of you who are wondering what judicial notice is, it's essentially the type of information the panel presiding over the matter will be accepting as an undebatable fact, such as the sun rises in the east, or more specific to many of the COVID-related cases I've covered in the past, things like COVID-19 injections are safe and effective because Health Canada says so. Listen to Turner explain how this win occurred and why it's significant to Dr. Hoffe and others who may find themselves in a similar situation.
When the college issued the citation against Dr. Hoffe, shortly thereafter they provided the evidence in support of the charges against him, and they were comprised in an expert report from an epidemiologist who works for public health in BC. And that was a lengthy report with a number of references to other public health statements supporting these allegations. And we went and assembled a number of experts from around the world that we thought could speak to each of these issues, who were well qualified and experienced in these areas. And we presented all of that evidence to the college to say, here's what we say about these allegations. And so in response to that, we were about to have our disciplinary hearing in the first week of March of this year. And I think just around a week before we received, or just maybe 10 days before, we received an application from the college asking the discipline panel to take judicial notice of the facts that would essentially eliminate Dr. Hoffe's ability to present any of the evidence that we had now provided, or to in any way challenge the allegations against him. We responded, and we just received the decision, I believe it was last week, and thankfully the panel declined to take judicial notice of the key facts that the college was seeking judicial notice of. There were a total of 8 facts that the college was seeking judicial notice of. Some of the more sort of important ones, I would say, would include the statement that vaccines work. And the panel was asked to take judicial notice of that, and they declined to do that, which would mean that the college then is required to prove that. Another statement that the college asked the disciplinary panel to take judicial notice of was that vaccines are generally safe and have a low risk of harmful effects, especially in children. And the panel declined to take judicial notice of that as well. So it just means then that, as would typically happen in a case like this, the party making the allegation has to provide evidence to prove that allegation. It's significant because the trend in the case authorities, I would say, over the last 3-4 years has been that a number of courts, particularly in the family law context, where parents are maybe in a dispute about whether a child should receive the COVID shots or not, the courts have taken judicial notice of some of these facts. In Dr. Hoffe's case, I believe it's the first case in a disciplinary hearing context like this where the panel has also acknowledged this now and saying it's not appropriate to take judicial notice of the fact that just because Health Canada has approved it does not necessarily mean it's safe or effective. You must prove that. And thankfully, the College of Physicians and Surgeons disciplinary panel agreed that that was the proper way to deal with this, is you need to prove your facts on a balance of probabilities. So in other words, more likely than not that what you assert is true. And very importantly, if someone disagrees with you, like Dr. Hoffe, he is entitled to bring evidence to challenge that assertion. And then the court will weigh the evidence and decide, what the facts are.
My reaction to the fact that the college is now required to prove their facts and not just declare them to be true is wonderful, because public health has been ignoring the evidence of harm since the very start of this vaccine rollout. The fact that I have been trying to draw attention to the evidence of harm since it first appeared in the very early months of this vaccine rollout, and they have persecuted me for drawing attention to the evidence of harm. And so now the fact that the college needs to face that evidence of harm is wonderful, because we need to be practicing evidence-based medicine. We need to look at the evidence to decide if what we're doing is the right thing. That's what evidence-based medicine is all about. That's why doctors have to continually educate themselves. As a licensing requirement, every doctor has to do 50 hours of continuing education per year. And that is because we have to constantly be looking at new evidence to see if what we thought was right is right. And so the fact that the college is now in the situation where they can't just declare things to be true without proving it is wonderful, because we need to be following the science and following the evidence.
Will the panel follow the actual science over the political science? Only time will tell. Hoff's disciplinary hearing is tentatively scheduled to begin this October, during a time when his attorney, Lee Turner, isn't even available. So the hope is that an adjournment will be granted so that Turner can continue as Hoff's counsel and hopefully continue with some more wins. A website called drhoffe.ca has been set up for those interested in helping and finding out the latest in the doctor's battle for medical ethics and transparency. I'm Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. If you believe that the experiment COVID-19 injections that many were coerced into taking need to be halted off the market, at least until we know they are safe and effective, go to our special website called nomoreshots.ca and sign and share our petition today.